All right, up next, we got Doug Billings in Missouri, dougbillings.us. Doug, what are you doing this week to save America?
Jason, well, I have a show called The Right Side, and we continually try to push out the messaging of local involvement. I'm a real big believer in that, the grassroots effort. For example, local Republican committee men and women in their positions and what they can
Yeah.
do to educate the counties within the state to help retrieve the republic away from the grip of what I call the Communist Socialist Party. The Democrat Party has evolved into this blend of communism and socialism. So just to be very brief,
Yeah.
local involvement. Forget Washington, D.C. Change never, ever starts there. It all happens right in our local level. So this week, we're focusing on waking people up to that. We've got 56 days until a major election. We've got to get people out and vote. And my emphasis and my trajectory with that is to try to convince them to vote on election day.
Yes. Yeah, I'm the same way. That I can unpack so much of what you just said. General Flynn, he always says local impact makes a national impact.
Yep.
Right? Is it something to that
Yeah,
effect?
local action has a national
Yes,
impact. Yep.
absolutely. And unfortunately, it's like the local politics, the quote unquote small politicians, if you will, small races. These are words that they always use. It's the farm team to where they can get experience, where they run for quote unquote higher office. But that hierarchy is upside down. We're supposed to have this small, far off federal government with limited impact into our daily lives. It's completely upside down. But yes, it is that farm team. It is that process of getting engaged locally. Are you getting a lot of traction with that? Are people actually, because it's exciting, the national news, the talking points, the talking heads, it's all federal government, but it is the local impact.
Yep.
What are people's reactions to
I
that?
am real passionate about it. I'm very thrilled with the reawakening, if you will,
Yeah.
of the American people and in their view, recognizing, Jason, first, people are recognizing the honest truth. And if we as conservatives look at ourselves in the mirror,
Mhm.
we have to admit, and many people
Yes.
are, that over the last 120 years, a lot of people look at this and think the current situation just was sprung upon us in 2020,
Right.
the theft of an American presidential election and so forth and so on. But the radical liberal movement has been at it since 1897, and that's not a number I'm just pulling out of thin air, but the days of John Rockefeller, John Dewey, and Andrew Carnegie, three of the richest men in America who were all avowed socialists, pooled their money and their resources and began quite literally to overtake the American education system
Right.
and indoctrinate people. And John and Jane Doe on the streets of America, who believed in that ideology, became activists. And
Mm.
we conservatives did not. We did not become active in our local government, in our local county
Right.
government. We did great things. We raised families with American traditional values. We went to great wars and we won them, but we did not get involved. And so now we're playing catch up to a degree.
Mhm.
But there is a reawakening. And I've said to people, you probably get a sense of this too, but I think
Mhm.
we're on the cusp of the greatest reawakening to the divine providence of God and the intent of the founding fathers since the time of the founding fathers.
Yes.
I think there's a great reawakening happen, and it's at the grassroots level. I see all sorts of people taking an interest now in county boards of commissioners, school boards,
Yes.
city aldermen, sheriffs, state senate, state house. I see that everywhere I look in the Midwest, at least.
Right. Yeah. And part of that whole COVID strategy kind of backfired on them because it kept the parents in the home. It put
Right.
the education online. People started peeking into the Zoom meeting with their classroom, say, "What are you teaching?" And all of a
Exactly.
sudden, they realized what was going on. Would you say when you said 1897, when was the Pledge of Allegiance with the Bellamy Salute? When did that come in to begin to erode your state, your nation state, your appreciation and allegiance to your state, and created this allegiance to this federal government thing? But people say it used to be um, these United States, and then it became the United States.
That's a great question. I don't know
Yeah,
the exact date. I'd have to look
yeah.
that up when we started saying the pledge. I know that the under God part was added, I believe, in the 1950s, but
Hmm.
boy,
Yeah.
that's a great one. I don't know. I'd have to look it up. But yeah, with that in mind, you're
Mhm.
absolutely right. The states were meant, the federal government. I mean, if people would be shocked, perhaps they already are, if they realized the overreach the federal government has evolved into. I mean, this nonsense is crazy. The thought that the federal government would have a right, for example, to implement an abortion ban or an abortion allowance. The federal government can't do that.
Mhm.
That's exactly why Roe v. Wade, for example, was overturned. The federal government doesn't have that power to go either way. Just for the record, they can't prevent abortion. They can't allow it. That's not the federal government's job. It's the states that have got to make those
Yeah.
decisions for themselves. And that's where we, as patriots at the grassroots level,
Mhm.
we need to engage in what I call determined patriotism. We've
Yes.
got to be determined. There will be some states, unfortunately, that allow
Mhm.
abortion, but we have a duty, no matter where we live and no matter what color our state is, blue or red, we have a duty to engage in determined patriotism, to try to reclaim the republic away from this radical liberal communist
Yes.
socialist, formerly known as Democrat Party.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of some of these national pro-life groups are kind of struggling, and some of them, I don't know if they were operating under this belief that if we just reverse Roe v. Wade, we'd be all set, abortion would be illegal, blah blah blah. But really, what it did is instead of one battleground in the federal level, it created 50 battlegrounds, and a lot of them are now, oh my gosh, what do we have to do? But you're right, it's state by state. I would offer, however, the reversal of Roe v. Wade said it corrected the wrong. The wrong was claiming that the Constitution provided or protected a right to abortion. And there's like, no, it didn't do that. So we reversed it. But I would offer second part of the Fifth Amendment applying to the federal government and the 14th Amendment, that statement, no person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. I still believe that at the federal level, it is the government's job to protect life per se, but they're going to get stuck on the definition of the word person. But I digress.
Well met. No, that's well met.
Yeah.
I appreciate hearing that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So 1897, the Rockefellers and all of them, it culminates into
Yep.
1913. I
Yep.
believe the worst year in America. The Federal Reserve, the income tax, the 16th Amendment, and the direct election of senators erasing this, sending our state representatives to Washington, D.C. And now we have a House of Representatives and a smaller House of Representatives. Comments on 1913.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
think that what we've done since 1913 in general, we've been driven away from the intent of the founding fathers.
Mm-hmm.
I think that I mean, I do know that if Trump wins, and I'm just going to put it out there, when Trump wins, there's
Yes.
going to take a long, hard look at a lot of these things.
Mm-hmm.
The IRS being one of them. I know that he'll look at the Department of Education, the Department of Energy, and the Department of Interior, just to name a few.
Yeah.
Clearly, the DOJ is going to be on the table to be gut cleansed and purged, and so yeah, the intent of the founders is lost in this country today. We've got to reclaim that. And
Yes.
for me, it's as we talked about just as we opened up this segment.
Mm-hmm.
For me, it's as fundamental as voting on election day, as the
Yeah.
founders intended.
Mm-hmm.
This early voting nonsense. And I understand. I heard from Scott Pressler the other day, who does great work with registering voters and at the grassroots level. He's out in Pennsylvania doing a heck of a job.
Mm-hmm.
And he's advocating that this time we vote early because we want to bank some votes in case there's a catastrophic event on election day. So, I mean, I get that. Again, I
Right.
say well met. I understand that. But once we recover, we need to get back
Yes.
to what the founders intended on election day. Look, every other industrial country in the world can handle election day. They count the votes, and within 48 hours at the most,
Right.
they've got the results. So we can do this, and I
Yeah.
think we have to.
Absolutely. We have to show up to make it too big to rig.
100%. Yeah.
Because the way they do the rig, I mean, there's a lot of different places, but they puff up like Jovan Pulitzer, I think, in one of the interviews years ago, he came up with pumping stuff or whatever it was. They pump up the registration because you can't have a fake ballot or some manipulated ballot or some sort of whatever if you don't have a registration to match. So that's the game that they're under. But we just have to make it too big to rig. Early voting, I still have an issue with. But it's obviously a lot different than this mail-in voting or.
Oh yeah. That's a
Yeah.
whole different story. Mail-in voting, unless you're in the military, unless you're disabled, we will do our best to verify and accommodate all of that type of thing. But
Right.
But in general, yeah, immediate end to this mail-in. It's crazy to be doing that.
Yeah.
So much opportunity for fraud. And there's also, Jason, there's also people out there on our side
Mhm.
who still are plagued by this. Well, I'm not going to vote because it's rigged. And I just not, you can't vote yourself out of a rigged system. And so I've got a couple of things. First of all, again, the purists, I believe that this republic was inspired by God. I believe it.
Mhm.
I believe that the founding fathers were inspired by the divine providence of God, and that our founding documents reflect that. That
Amen.
they're also inspired by God. So I would suggest kindly to those people who may be tempted to say that a patriot doesn't say those kinds of things.
Right.
Those are the words of a snowflake. Well, I'm not going to do it because it's rigged. Doggone it. Well, our rights come from God. If we do not engage in the rights that God has provided us, we don't honor God. And
Right.
by the way, we don't honor the military who have gone to the battlefield to defend our rights that come from God.
Right.
So I would just urge everyone to reconsider that. Get out, vote. Conservatives, look, we always show up. We face adversity, challenge, and tragedy head on, and we meet it. And we understand that it's not always easy, but on the other side, there's blessings waiting to be born because of
Yes.
our efforts. We've got to stay involved.
Summer soldiers and sunshine patriots will shirk
Yes.
in this crisis from their duty.
Yep.
Last year, I kind of changed some slogans. I had a new focus, and I started using the taking responsibility for liberty,
Yeah.
because
I like that.
we have outsourced so many areas of our life to these experts. And just because they got a white lab coat, stethoscope around their neck, and a plaque
Right.
behind them on the wall, we're supposed to believe them. Just because we drop our kids off at school, we assume that they're doing the right thing by our kids and educating them. People are taking this response. So I love the fact that you are recognizing there is a and seeing there's an awakening of people taking the reins again, pulling back and saying,
Yep.
I need to take responsibility for these things.
Yep. Yeah. And I think yes, I believe that. And I also think it's important that we gift ourselves with at least four virtues that I mentioned, at least wisdom with a capital W from the Holy
Mhm.
Spirit. We seek wisdom. We want to understand. We want to know the truth, and we
Mhm.
want to then reflect wisdom, and then we reflect. We don't react like the radical liberal left, right? we
Right.
we reflect, and then we take action. Wisdom, reflect, action, and it's always peaceful for us. Peaceful action. Look, there is going to be no civil war with weapons and pitchforks and machine guns and tanks in the street. None of we do this. The radical left didn't take control by those means, and
Right.
neither will we. We'll do it peacefully because we are on the side of truth. And then finally, the last virtue is patience. We've got to gift ourselves with this virtue of patience. This will not remedy itself overnight, and
Yeah.
it won't remedy itself by itself. We, the people, are the remedy.
Yes. I wrote an article recently called "The Church Must Save America." And the reason why I say it that way is because we're supposed to be a nation recognizing our God given rights. And what is the church looking to do? Wait for the secularists and the atheists to defend our God given rights? We're going to end up with a democracy where rights are determined by the majority of voters. That's
Yeah.
why I believe the church must get activated. What do you say to the church?
I'm going to show. I'm not getting anything. This is not. I don't. There's nothing in this for me. But I was just given this book the other day. It's called "Religionless Christianity," and it's by
Mm,
Eric Metaxas. I have not read it
yes.
yet, but I can't.
Mm,
But the title is intriguing. Religionless Christianity.
mm,
So for me, the church, I mean, this republic that we have was founded on people who are searching for freedom to express their belief in God. And so the church has failed. I am a member of the Catholic Church. That's my faith tradition. We have failed, completely failed from the pulpit to talk about what has been going on recently.
mhm.
We don't talk about, this radical left, abhorrent, immoral agenda. The fact that we are, the radical left, the transgender movement, just as an example, Jason, it's absolutely evil. The thought that a major political party in this country would advocate that children who believe in the fiction of gender misappropriation can only find happiness if they mutilate their genitalia. And those were gruesome words, but they
Right.
need to be said because that's what they're doing. I've told my pastor, I've told other people, and Father James Altman said it first, but I repeat it often. You cannot be a Christian and a Democrat. The two philosophies do not align. Now, the
Yeah.
Republican Party is not perfect, but at least we believe in God. We have not excommunicated God out of our platform. and we at least
Right.
try and strive for his glory and for the intent of the founding fathers. At least we try. But the other side has flat out said no. And they've said that they want to fundamentally transform America.
Mhm. Yep, we're
And what
5 days away, he
yeah, they
says.
want to do it. And you cannot
Yeah,
be an American patriot and say that we want to transform America. America does not need to be transformed.
right. Absolute 1,000% on that. It seems that, call it incrementalism, moral relativism for the last 50 years that, we'll take off the 10 commandments off the wall, prayer in school, then it's call it gay marriage, if you will. And then the man versus woman, gender, all of these issues, they are mocking God. They are putting distrust into the Bible. And a lot of
Yep.
these pastors, if you will, priests and pastors, they're afraid of their 501c3 status. They're afraid of offending their donors in the pews
They don't want to
because
lose their tithes. Yep.
right.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's the whole Bible.
it's a real issue. And
Yeah.
if anyone were to take 5 minutes and research early colonial American school curriculums, you would find that every one of the
Right.
founding fathers, even the ones that weren't, even the Thomas Jeffersons and the Benjamin Franklins of the world,
Mhm.
they wanted school curriculums to include study of the Bible, theology, philosophy, the
Yep.
arts, arithmetic, civics, as opposed to just pure history.
Right.
And so, and it always had been that way, but the radical left has, you're right, incrementally just snuffed it out. And then thankfully, though, we see efforts of the grassroots in states like Louisiana with
Yes.
their governor putting the 10 Commandments back in, mandating that, and so forth.
And is
So,
it Oklahoma bringing the Bible back into
yep,
curriculum?
yep. I was just going to say that. Yep,
Yeah,
absolutely.
that's great. You know, I think that's great, especially considering our founding and where the Bible was in education, as you pointed out. I'm concerned, I hardly trust very many pastors and priests to interpret the Bible for me. Now, to have teachers do that, I think it's good that it's there, but it kind
Yeah,
of makes me nervous a little bit. But
yeah.
yeah,
Well, yeah, I would, I agree.
yeah,
I'll take that over no Bible. I'll take the Bible over no Bible, but
right.
yes,
Yeah.
in my experience, before I began my current role, and many moons ago, I was a
Mhm.
school teacher in a Catholic high school and taught theology, believe it or not. I
Mm.
had spent some time in the seminary, and I would so I see, and your concern is well met, because
Yeah.
there are people out there who just don't have. I'm not I'm not saying that inspiration and desire alone are not adequate to read and understand the Bible, but you need to have some training on context and the time of the day, back then, what things meant, and you have to be at least a little bit aware of those kinds of things to get a grasp. So I wouldn't want my kids just to be taught by anyone.
Right.
They have to have
Right.
some training, but yeah.
That's great. Yeah, I love that. And I talk with a dear friend of mine, Alice, and a lot of her colleagues in Texas, and they've been on this awakening of the devil in the details in the takeover of education in Texas, and they've done phenomenal work, and they raise that very concerned. It's like I always say it's like the phone game. I call Doug on the phone, tell you a story. You call Jim, and you call, and then by the time 8 people comes back to me, it's a different story. It's a watered down
Yeah,
version of the original. I think it's that way for Christianity and liberty.
yeah.
I have a hard time getting mad at teachers today for not teaching my kids about natural God given rights because they were probably not even taught that. And is it any wonder we send our kids to government schools? They
Yeah.
come out not knowing how the government's supposed to work.
Well, yes, and I can tell you, as a former
Mhm.
teacher,
Mhm.
far too many parents depend on the school system in general to do all of the work.
Yes.
And in the Catholic school setting, I can tell you this: kid parents send their kids to a Catholic school. It doesn't have to be just Catholic. It could be any denomination. They send them to a Christian school, and they expect the teachers and everyone else to teach them religion. And parents kind of wash their hands and say, okay, well, I don't have to deal with that. I'm always the spiritual guide and leader of
Mhm.
my family and of my kids, and it's my responsibility to teach them the truth about our faith tradition.
Yeah.
School supplements that, but it's our responsibility at home. That's traditional American values.
Yes. 1,000%. Doug, tell me about the event you have coming up in December.
Thank you for letting me do that. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
called the Determined Patriotism Conference. We do a couple of these every year. I try to gather some of America's tier one level influencers, public figures, podcasters, and we gather together for information, motivation, and inspiration to look at the republic, to give specific ways about how we recover the republic, what we can
Yes.
do at the grassroots level to get involved. I bring committee men and women in from various states,
Mm,
and they network with one another depending on where they live, and they go back out to engage in what we call determined patriotism, thereby the
yes.
Determined Patriotism Conference, to get involved. So this is coming up in December, December 13th and 14th. I know it's close to Christmas. It's going to be in Branson, Missouri.
Mm,
Branson, Missouri is beautiful at Christmas time. They've got,
yes.
I mean, it's like walking into a Norman Rockwell painting. It's beautiful down there. We'll have a Friday and Saturday conference. We'll go to a show, Branson show on Friday night. You've got to do that when you're in Branson. Then we'll have a dinner on Saturday night together. But in between all of that, really great influencers and podcasters. General Michael Flynn, Mike Lindell, Eric Trump is considering it, not confirmed. So stay tuned about that.
Mhm.
Mel K, myself, Alex Stone. We just received word that Devin Nunes may be coming down. So there a lot. It'll be 10 or 12 influencers and people that can bring good information, plus local elected officials who can
Mhm.
speak to what it takes.
Yes.
We're going to have a few constitutional sheriffs there, members of the Missouri and Kansas Senate and legislature, just to talk about what it takes to get involved, if and show us the pathway to do that. So I think that it's basically, and hopefully, knock on wood, like we were talking earlier, hopefully it's a celebration for the election of President Trump too. We can add all of that in as well.
Yes. Determined Patriot patriotismconference.com. I'll put a
Yes.
link down below
Yeah.
to the conference and all that.
DeterminedPatriotismConference.com. It's up and running right now. Tickets and information are available for the
Yeah.
2 days. I think it's $125. Yeah, and for both days,
Yeah.
and there's a hotel included, and so just most people arrive on Thursday, and then
Mhm.
the conference begins Friday and Saturday.
That's great. And I've been to a lot of these different events, and you have these speakers, and they get you all fired up about the decision you already made to come there, and they're not really sharpening iron. They're not giving you calls to action, and it seems like you're
Exactly.
challenged. Maybe
Yep.
your challenge to your speakers is come with what are the calls to action.
Yep.
That's what I'm trying to do with the show as
100%.
well.
Yep,
Yeah.
yep, and that's the mission. We come there and arm people, and the entire point is
Yes.
to go back home and get involved and do what they've done for 128 years, and we haven't. And so, yeah, that's what.
Well, wait a minute. I thought we just vote November 5th and everything's
Oh
going to
yeah,
be
yeah,
fine. Trump wins and he's going to save everybody.
yeah. That's exactly right. That illustrates the mindset. And you know what?
Yeah.
August 6th, just a few weeks ago, we
Mhm.
had a primary up here in my neck of the woods in the Missouri region, and I went to after election day the primary. I go in one of my favorite little pubs, and I wanted to grab a beer with a buddy of mine. And I know the regulars in this little bar, and I asked them, "So who'd you vote for? What?" And they go, "What?" I said,
What
"Well,
are you
it's
talking about?
right." They didn't have any idea,
Ugh.
and these are people that I know fairly well. I mean, I would assume, but I would have assumed they knew. I mean, we don't really get into the weeds about politics, but I mean, gee whiz, these are bright people
Yes.
that have high level jobs. You would assume, and I kind of laid into them. This is more
Oh, yeah.
important in a lot of ways than the general election because it determines
1,000%.
who we get. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah. It's our closest opportunity, our greatest opportunity in the primary to get somebody as close to our principles as possible.
amen.
And then it's the general, and it is what it is.
Yep,
But my goodness, yeah, I know turnout rates this past
pathetic,
year.
pathetic.
Like if Rome is burning, and those are the turnout rates, really, people.
Yeah. Jason, one other thing just before, and I know your time is limited, and I appreciate you letting me chat with you.
Hmm.
There may be a lot of people in your audience who have thought about what we went through in 2022 during the midterms, because the primary season just reminded me of this. There was a lot of anticipation about this red wave that we were going to have. And when
Right.
people talked about that, when they were looking at that, what they were doing was they were talking about Washington, D.C.
Hmm.
And they were thinking, okay, great, we're going to reclaim the House and or bolster our numbers there, and we're going to take the Senate. And that didn't happen. And so their hopes were kind of dashed. But I want to set the record straight on that. We did have a red wave, and it was a huge red wave. It just didn't happen in Washington, D.C. It happened throughout the Republic. When you look at every state measured against one another, conservatives won 132 seats and liberals won 70. So we had a red wave across the country. We just didn't have it in Washington, D.C. So again, forget D.C. Concentrate on your local level, the county in which you live.
Yeah.
That's where your life is controlled most immediately, and then build from there. Get your county, and then get your state. And once your state's situated, then focus on DC. But man, we had a great 2022. It's just that the news and the media, they looked at it from the wrong angle.
Right. Well, it might have been on purpose to get you thinking,
Yes.
get people
Yeah.
red wave. It's
Yeah.
done. It's in the bag. Relax. Those of you who are weak, you're going to stay home anyways. So yeah, anytime you see a poll, there's a reason why you see that poll. It's because somebody wanted you to see the poll.
Yes.
They don't even talk about the internals, how it was manipulated, but the effect is the result of that poll. Don't believe the polls. Get out there.
Right on. Right on.
So today, what are a couple things people can do today, this week? What can we the people do to save America?
Well, I would begin if the grassroots level is out there and they're ready to be motivated, but they don't know quite where to go to get information. I would say that, again, in the county in which you live, get on Facebook, get on the internet, and just Google or DuckDuckGo search for Republican committee men and women position, and look up that first, your Republican committee men and women in your county. I can assure you that wherever you live, who's ever watching this little interview right here, wherever you live, there is a Republican group of some kind out there. The Jackson County Republican Club, or the Cass County Women's Republican Guild, or whatever. There's something like that out there where you live. Look them up, find them, seek them out, and ask them your questions. Ask them, how do I get involved? Where are my services needed? How do I get involved? Throughout the country, we do have these literal positions, Republican committee men and women, who are responsible for choosing the delegates who go to our national convention and so forth, and who choose candidates within your state. And you can also ask them, how do you vet? Because we have a rhino problem. We have a huge Republican in name only problem with candidates who are really Democrats, but they know that in the county in which they live, if they run as a Democrat, they can never win. So they go to the county clerk and they apply to be on the ballot as a Republican, and then it's trouble. So the Republican committees within your counties, at least and where I live, they're beginning now to form vetting committees where we vet everybody who wants to put an R behind their name. And there's a series of questions, and they're on the record. Then if it's a candidate already in office, it's a little bit easier, but they still have to go through the process. I mean, because we know their record. They voted in Congress or in the Senate, but we still have them go through the process. And we have them now on record as, here's where I stand on any array of issues: life, guns, Second Amendment, free speech, whatever. And then they're vetted. And if they meet the criteria, the committee is responsible and has the right to grant them permission to run as a Republican. If they don't, then the county clerk can't put them on the ballot as a Republican. So we need to begin to get our counties on board with that kind of vetting process. And that, so those are a couple of suggestions. Get involved with your local Republican committee men and women. Seek out a Republican committee, specifically try to solve the rhino problem. And then, there's always, there's over 169,000 vacancies in these Republican committeemen and women positions throughout the country. So that's a perfect place to volunteer your time. And there's also poll watching in election seasons, especially presidential elections. Volunteer or take the training to be a paid poll observer, and keep an eye on these Democrats who might try to say, well, the toilet line broke again at midnight. We've got to usher you guys out. You remember those stories from last time?
Put the pizza boxes on the wall.
Yeah, right. Exactly. So those would be just a few concrete examples of where you go, but it all begins with just looking up and researching where you can find your Republican committees within your counties, and then springboard from there.
We all have a role to play. We need all hands on deck. It's like the body of Christ. We need someone to be the elbow and the wrist and the spleen. There's so many roles to be filled here. That's great advice. Absolutely. This week, get plugged in.
Right on. I can't thank you enough for helping to get this message out, Jason. It's so important that people hear this. Cheers to you for doing it.
Well, I appreciate you, Doug. I appreciate all that you do in your show and all the awakening. If you can encapsulate that and inspire other people to also wake up, that's awesome. DougBillings.us. You've got the organization or the event coming up. I'll put the description and the link down below. Doug, thank you for your service to our country.
God bless you, Jason. Thank you.
Thank you.
We're in this together.
You bet. This segment brought to you by the Remembrance Project, theremembranceproject.org.